Oh hey, how's it going? Hopefully y'all are having a great start to the new year and had a happy holiday. With the coming of the new year in our great world of football, we have had the sad but eventful last week of the 2022-2023 regular NFL season, which had plenty of teams ending with a high note and some with a low note. We also had the time to watch the NCAA national title between the Dogs and the Frogs, with Georgia dominating the game to win back-to-back titles. But that is not the point of today's video. If you haven't already seen the thumbnail, we will be discussing the great continuation of our sport, the NFL, with the upcoming Wildcard weekend to determine who will end up facing the two number one seeds for their respective conferences. For the NFC side, we have the Philadelphia Eagles as the number one seed, led by Jalen Hurts. And for the AFC number one seed, we have the Patrick Mahomes-led Kansas City Chiefs. Before we get into them, though, let's discuss the wild card. For the first matchup to kick off Wild Card weekend will be the Seattle Seahawks going down to Santa Clara, California to face their arch rival, the NFC West champions, the number 2 seed in the playoffs, the San Francisco 49ers. Both of these teams are coming into these playoffs with a massive chip on their shoulders. With the traveling 7th seed Seattle, they are coming off a tremendous season in their own right. Many people, including myself, who is a diehard Seahawks fan, keep that in mind, thought that we were going to be absolutely terrible after we traded what seemed to be our future Hall of Fame quarterback at the time, Russell Wilson, which, again, at the time seemed like a terrible trade for Seattle. But with Geno Smith back at the starting quarterback position, he had his best season by far, setting franchise records for multiple stats for the Seattle Seahawks organization. He had 4,282 passing yards, which was a career high and a franchise record. He had 30 passing touchdowns, which was a career high. He had also a 69.8 completion percentage, which was also the highest, which was a franchise record. Also with the additions of tight end Noah Fant from Denver and rookies Kenneth Walker III, Tariq Woolen, and some other rookies, the Pete Carroll and Seattle Seahawks have managed to have a 9-8 record and the last seed in the playoffs. For the NFC West champs, during Week 13, there was a lot of doubt going around the world and the NFL after we saw the 49ers lose their starting quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, due to a broken foot injury in the game against the Miami Dolphins. After already losing their first-round draft pick, their future Trey Lance. So, they had to turn to one man to bring the city of San Francisco to the promised land, Mr. Irrelevant, Mr. Pick 262 of the 2022 NFL Draft, big ol' Mr. Brock Purdy. Since then, they haven't looked back. Seems like with Brock at the helm, all they've done is win, having a 5-0 record, being the starter, while also including his win against the Miami Dolphins when he came in for Jimmy Garoppolo. While Brock has started, he's had an incredible stat line, wowing many fans with the stats of 1,374 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, a 67 completion percentage, and a QBR of 107.3. With his play, he's elevated the play of tight end George Kittle with his 5 receiving touchdowns in the last 3 games of the season, as well as having a top defense in the league, led by Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. So for their game, the 49ers have already bested the Seahawks twice this year, with their last game being in Seattle against Brock Purdy. The final score was 21-13, and Brock Purdy did go 17 of 26 for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kittle had 93 receiving yards and both of Brock Purdy's touchdowns. And newly acquired running back Christian McCaffrey had over 100 rushing yards with a touchdown. So if everything goes well for the 49ers this week, they should be able to get the job done against Geno and the Seattle Seahawks for a third time. The only way I can see the 49ers losing is with the lack of playoff experience from Brock Purdy, knowing that he has none compared to Geno Smith. For the first wildcard game for the AFC side, we will be featuring the 7th seed Miami Dolphins traveling up to the cold Buffalo, New York to face the Bills. Both of these teams have had devastating injuries this season, as well as coming into this game. The Dolphins have been going without Tua Tagovailoa ever since Week 16, since he went back into concussion protocol because of a gnarly head injury against the Packers. With the news on Wednesday confirming that Tua will not go in for the game, the Dolphins will have to either go with Teddy Bridgewater, who is hopefully coming back from an injury, and if not, they'll have to go with the rookie quarterback who won his first career start in Week 18 to secure the 7th seed for Miami. Quarterback Skylar Thompson. While Skylar did go 20 of 31 and 152 yards for the win, with Tyreek and Waddle both starting, keep that in mind, that was against the New York Jets, who don't even know who they're going to have at quarterback for the future, not the Bills. The Bills, on the other hand, also went through a terrible injury during Monday Night Football against the Bengals in Week 17 to determine the number 1 seed at the time. Then, in the middle of the first quarter, Damar Hamlin made a routine tackle on T. Higgins and went down with cardiac arrest immediately on the field. Both medical teams tried resuscitating him and giving him CPR for about 10 minutes before they took him to the Cincinnati Medical Hospital. Since then, Damar is healthy and out of the hospital, going through early stages of recovery with recent news. Having something like this happen to your team where a teammate is battling between life and death and survives, this is going to help motivate the Bills team so much into the playoffs with all of the support with Bills Mafia behind him. For the Bills themselves, Josh Allen has had an almost mirror-like season with last season, having 4,283 passing yards, 35 passing touchdowns, with a 63.3 completion percentage. Stephon Diggs himself has had another phenomenal year similar to his 2020 campaign when he had over 1,500 yards. This year, he had 108 receptions for 1,429 yards and a career high with 11 receiving touchdowns. For their game, the Bills have split the series with the Dolphins this season, but that was with Tua Tagovailoa as the Dolphins' starting quarterback. Unless Teddy can play or Skylar Thompson can become the next Brock Purdy and ball out with Tyreek and Waddle, the Bills' defense is going to have their way with the Dolphins, and I think the Bills are most likely going to win this game. Back on the NFC side, the second wild card game this weekend features the New York Football Giants and the NFC North champions, the Minnesota Vikings. For this one, we already had an exact preview of this game during Week 16 when, again, New York went to Minneapolis to play the Vikings. The score was 27-24, Minnesota with the win. Kirk Cousins had 299 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, with newly acquired TJ Hawkinson catching 2 of those touchdowns. Even though Daniel Jones did put up a fighting effort and had 334 passing yards and a touchdown, he did end up throwing an interception to veteran Patrick Peterson to help the Vikings win that game. What gave the Vikings that win was the miraculous drive after that interception by Patrick Peterson, which was led by Kirk Cousins and ended up giving them a good enough spot for Greg Joseph chance to hit a 61-yard game-winning field goal. I don't see much changing the outcome of this game, of this upcoming wildcard game, unless Kirk Cousins becomes the old Kirk Cousins that we all know and love. For the second wildcard game of the AFC side, we will have the divisional rematch between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. These two teams have split the series this season, with the recent being this last week when Baltimore did travel to Cincinnati. The Baltimore Ravens did lose that game, mainly for the reason of their loss of starting quarterback Lamar Jackson. Lamar has been out for the last 5 weeks since he got a knee injury during the game versus the Broncos. With that, the Ravens have struggled immensely on offense with his absence. The quarterback they have currently is Tyler Huntley. Last week, they started Anthony Brown for the very first time. The Ravens did end up losing that game 27-16. For For the Bengals, Joe Burrow had a similar season to last year when they went to the Super Bowl. This year, throwing for 4,475 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, and only 12 interceptions with a 68 completion percentage, along with career highs in rushing yards with 257 and rushing touchdowns with 5 touchdowns. Ja'Marr Chase hasn't had a good of a season compared to his rookie year he had last year. He was still very productive though, with 87 receptions for 1,046 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. He hasn't had the best season because he did miss 5 games earlier this season. So for the game itself, the Ravens are already not starting Lamar Jackson, with him announcing that he has a slight PCL strain in his knee. I don't see the Ravens winning this game at all. If they start Tyler Huntley or Anthony Brown, they're gonna get smacked by the Bengals. So with our last wildcard game for the NFC side, we will have the Dallas Cowboys traveling to the NFC South champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. These teams did play each other during the regular season opener, with the Bucs dominating 19-3. Since then, the Bucs have struggled mightily more than the Cowboys have this season, mainly with all the drama surrounding Tom Brady from this last offseason, with him retiring, unretiring a month later, then leaving his entire family to play football, and all the while is not looking like the GOAT we all know and love as football fans. Comparing to last year, he had 622 less passing yards with 4,694 yards and 18 less touchdowns this season with 25. We haven't seen Tom drop this much from one season to another since Tom's last season in New England when he was a Patriot. Tom and the NFC South champ Buccaneers as a whole have struggled, having an 8-9 record proving that. The Cowboys, on the other hand, since that loss, have gone the opposite from the Bucs, and since then have went 12-4 and second in the NFC East behind the number 1 seed Philadelphia Eagles. They did play the NFC North and AFC South, which weren't very good this year, which makes sense why they won. But Dak Prescott didn't have a good season this year comparable to his other top years. This year he had only 2,860 passing yards, only 23 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions, with a 66.3 completion percentage, while missing 5 games this season due to an injury and Cooper Rush replacing him. Tony Pollard continues to show he should be the top guy there in Dallas instead of Ezekiel Elliott, with Tony having 1,007 yards to Zeke's 876. Micah Parsons himself has had a very productive season on defense, having a half a sack more than last season, totaling at 13.5 sacks, even though having 19 less total tackles. All in all, the Cowboys have the best matchup they could have had compared to who else they could have played. With how different these two teams have been since opening weekend of the season, unless Dak Prescott ends up shitting the bed, the Cowboys should win this game. With our last game of the wildcard weekend, we will have the LA Chargers traveling to Jacksonville to play the Jaguars, who won the AFC South this season last week when they defeated the Tennessee Titans 20-16 to finish off an incredible 5-game winning streak to finish the season. Probably one of the hottest teams coming into these playoffs, proving a lot of doubters wrong when they were 4-8 before their 5-0 run. Trevor Lawrence has improved tremendously this season comparing to his rookie year, with 500 more passing yards, more than double his passing touchdowns, and cutting his interceptions in half. Truly making himself a great and up-and-coming quarterback. Super excited to watch him in the future. Travis Etienne has established himself as the leading back for Jacksonville as a first-year starter, when last year he wasn't able to play at all. This year, he had 1,125 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns, while also having 316 receiving yards. On the other side, the Chargers ended up being 10-6, being second in the AFC West behind the number 1 seed Kansas City Chiefs. The Justin Herbert-led Chargers finished their last 5 games 4-1, with the loss coming from Denver in the last game of the season when they lost to the Russell Wilson-led Broncos 28-31. A very disappointing loss like that to an opponent you should have beat could affect the morale and momentum of that team going into a high-stakes game like the playoffs. Justin Herbert hasn't had the top-tier stats that he would usually have, with having 300 fewer passing yards and 13 less touchdowns, while playing an extra game and having his best completion percentage of his career. The only way I see this game playing out is either team can win or lose. Both teams are coming off of hot season endings, but the Jaguars have an advantage going into this game, being the hotter team with more momentum. The only way I can see the Jaguars losing is if Trevor Lawrence ends up not playing well because it's his first ever playoff start. So yeah, those are my predictions for this up-and-coming Wildcard weekend. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Please leave a comment if you guys agree or disagree with my predictions. Please leave a like, subscribe, and have a good one.